Good morning, everyone that's here, and welcome to the webinar on NavInjectorPro. My name is John Gann. Despite what the title page said, I'm not Eileen. Hopefully you can hear that in my voice. But today we're going to do a quick, simple overview on a little utility that we've been working on for a couple of years now called NavInjectorPro. And the idea with NavInjectorPro is that it's a simple and somewhat flexible utility for allowing you to inject navigation data as well as other parameters into different types of acoustic file formats such as XTF and SegY, JSF, and just a couple of weeks ago we added the Klein SDF format. And then you can also inject into our own internal SonarWiz format, CSF. So NavInjector, it works with an external navigation source file, and what it does is it merges that navigation or other parameter data from your ASCII source file using a template that you provide. It injects that into your target file. So your target file can be an XDF or SegY, etc. Or again, it can be your SonarWiz project. And the way it does that is it does it by time. So it injects, it looks at the time in your navigation data, and it tries to match that up with the nearest ping time in the sonar file. And if it can't find an exact match, you can choose to have it interpolate, and there's some controls on that we'll look at this morning. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at three different scenarios, three different sort of cases where you might use SonarWiz and NavInjectorPro to solve a problem. So the first case we're going to look at is where there's no navigation data in your original acoustic data set. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to look at some Klein SDF files. And we're going to use, for our navigation source, we're going to use a brand new interface that we just added a couple weeks ago for the Applanix SBET files. Applanix makes a tool that computes the smooth best estimate of trajectory, kind of a post-processing tool for cleaning up navigation, and it's commonly used for AUV operations and also for other sorts of things. So on the display here, hopefully let's see, I think you guys can see my, yep, you can see my display. We see a SonarWiz display here with nothing in it. So what I'm going to do, just to kind of walk you through how you might get into this situation to begin with, is to try and import a couple of side scan files that don't have navigation. And before I do that, I'll just back up here, and I want to look at the project settings here for a second, and I want to import this data using only the fish position, right? So I'm not using the ship position or auto. I'm specifically saying I want to make this mosaic from these side scan files with the fish position data. So I'll click on one of these files and say open. I'm on the import dialog in SonarWiz. And right away it comes back and it bails out and it puts a red line down here. It says error, no navigation data was extracted from blah, blah, blah from this file. So that's your first clue that there's something up with the navigation data, right? And you might not know about some of these tools in SonarWiz, so I'm going to just briefly talk about that. Under the tools panel in SonarWiz, we've got tools for containing utilities for different file types. So let's just look under SDF, and there's only one utility for SDF, and that's a navigation extractor. And let me get to the folder here for that. What we want to do is we want to open up an SDF file. Here are those two that we were just looking at. And what we want to do is just kind of dump out the navigation data. So SonarWiz generates a little spreadsheet of the navigation data, and so we can look at that in Excel. And what you see is that there is a ship position for these files, but there's no fish position for the file, and so that's why it failed to import. So now you got a little bit more information that you didn't have. You kind of understand, okay, what's going on here? Why is the file not importing? Okay, so we know we don't have any fish navigation in this file, and this is where you would use the utility NavInjectorPro. A few revs ago, we added NavInjectorPro to our Tools menu. So now there's a button on here right on the Tools panel for launching NavInjectorPro. You can also go through the Start menu and get to it that way. It's under the SonarWiz 5 branch under All Programs. There's a link to it there as well. Okay, so you get NavInjectorPro up, and this dialog is asking for several bits of information, and at the minimum, you're always going to provide a navigation file template, which I'll talk about in a second, a navigation input file, so where is this navigation data going to come from, and then you're going to provide a source folder for where is it going to read these files from that you want to repair, and where are you going to write them to. So there's a few bits of information that you have to provide. NavInjectorPro is a batch tool, so what you want to do is put all of your files in one folder that you want to operate on, and it'll generate a completely new set. It doesn't, trash, or there's no risk of overwriting your existing files. So it's going to write those files into a new folder for you, so you can actually go back and forth between the two. So let's look at the templates here for a minute, because this is where you're going to define how you're telling NavInjector how to read the data that you want to process. So in my template list, I've only got 3 here. I think the product ships with a few more, but I deleted some of mine to try to keep this demo a little bit quicker. So you see I've got a Planix SBET, daytime cable event, and daytime easting northing. So let's just go into the manager for a second, and let's see what we can actually do with these different templates. And the Planix SBET file is a brand new template and a brand new type of template. It's called a built-in template. So the SBET file is actually a binary file, not an ASCII file. And so you can't edit anything. These options here are all grayed out because this is a system-level template that we provide for you, and there's no changes to it. Next to are user-defined templates, which you create to match your ASCII navigation data. And we'll do that in the second and third case studies, where we're going to look at a different type of file. But anyway, just to tell you about the different options here in the template editor and the template manager, for the built-in types of file, again, they're read-only. You can't edit them. But what you can do is you can test your template, whatever type it is, against a file that you want to run. So if we use the choose button, we can choose. In this case, we're going to choose an SBET file. This would have come from the POS pack, the Planix POS pack software. And SBET files are kind of funny in that they don't contain a complete timestamp, date timestamp. They contain GPS seconds of week, but they don't tell you what week number. So you're forced to enter in the date, at least the nearest week number of your navigation data, or if you happen to be a GPS expert and you know the week number, you can enter in the GPS week number here. Either one works. Okay, so we set the week number, and then the little manager here has tested your template, this particular template, against that SBET file. And you can see it's parsed out the date and time, and the fish latitude, fish longitude, geoid height, roll, pitch, and heading. Okay, so that gives you some confidence then that your template matches your navigation source file. Okay, so I'll save that. So we've got that set up, we've got our template chosen. This input navigation file, again, that's the SBET file that we wanted to use. That's already set here, because I've practiced this once. And where are the original SDF files? So again, you can either key in the folder, with your keyboard, or you can use the browse button here to choose the folder that contains the SDF files that you want to operate on. Okay, because we've told the utility that we're going to work on SDF files. Okay. If we wanted to inject this data into a different type of file, you just choose the radio button here that matches the file, the destination file that you're going to work with. Okay, so finally, the last thing you got to tell it is, well, where do you want to write these new files? So when I inject the navigation and I create a new set of SDF files, where are they going to go? And I just created an out folder here under the in folder, so we can quickly go and take a look at that. Okay, so we start with that. Those are our settings that we need, and so what we want to do now is press the start button. And again, it asks me for the week number, which we're going to keep the same. And this next dialog here has got a few controls that we do need to talk about here. We can probably talk about them once in this case, and we'll skip over them in the next two cases. But what it's asking is, it's saying you've got some additional fields beyond navigation data in your source file, and do you want to use them, and do you want to try to inject them into your target files? This client prefix here, this is only used in XTF. This was something that we did for one of our larger customers that wanted this in there, but I don't think it's that useful for most operations. When you have a source file that contains navigation data, you can choose to update the ship position, the fish position, or both ship and fish position in your target file. So XTF, SegWi, SDF, those file types all contain a slot for storing both ship and fish position. JSF does not necessarily contain two storage locations, so this is sort of, it's many different file types are supported, so you kind of have to use a little bit of a filter when you do apply these things to kind of know what you're working with here. And CSF also only contains one position slot, so whatever position you choose here from your source file is going to be stuffed into that singular position slot. I mentioned in the introduction that this tool can interpolate the navigation for you. So say you've got a 10-minute sonar file, but you've only got 10 different navigation points. So you're going to extrapolate quite a bit of navigation data over those many pings in that sonar file. So if you don't want to interpolate, that's fine. SonarWiz the utility will take and find the nearest navigation record and assign that to multiple pings, right? So it finds the nearest navigation fix for every time in your sonar file. If you leave the interpolation on, it'll interpolate or extrapolate forward or backward for you, so that each ping has a unique navigation time. The best case is when you've got plenty of navigation data to cover your entire sonar file. If you check this box right below it, do not generate a file if navigation gaps exceed 300 seconds of time. So it won't interpolate over a certain range, right? So I've said if I've got more than a 300-second gap in my navigation data that falls inside of a sonar file, then don't bother interpolating. There's something else wrong and I want to know about it. So we don't want it to go sort of just interpolating wildly for 20 minutes, if there's a problem in the navigation data. And then lastly, SonarWiz or Nav Injector generates a threshold log file, and you can, when there are errors, you can sort of limit the number of entries in this log file by entering a time here. So in addition to latitude and longitude, we've got geoid height, roll, pitch, and heading coming from the SBET file. And if you don't want to try to inject those into your file, maybe you've got good parameters in those slots in your target file, then just uncheck these columns here, and the utility won't try to overwrite whatever's in your destination file or replace what's in your destination file. Okay, so that's kind of a quick description of what this tool does. And again, there is a nice little help tool, which we'll look at in a second, that's got this documented fairly well. All right, so I'm going to press OK here. And kind of the longest step in this utility is when it has to read in the navigation source. It loads up the entire navigation source file, which is about 1 million points in this SBET file, and then it sorts them, and then it starts examining the time in the source file. And then one by one, it's going to look at all the SDF files that it found in the SDF folder and start operating on that, and hopefully generating a new SDF file in the output folder. So let's look at some of the output that we got here. After loading in the SBET file, it sorted it, and it gives you a little summary. It says the nav started on April 5th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and went till 7 o'clock in the evening. It says there were no continuous, all the data is contiguous. There are no gaps greater than the 300 seconds that I told it I didn't want to interpolate over. This one little red note here is saying it didn't find a PRJ file. In SegWi and XTF files, we now write the PRJ information. PRJ is the map projection information, the geodesy. And several customers had requested that we embed that into the actual file. So in a SegWi file, it's written into the EBCDIC header. We use like the last 800 bytes of the EBCDIC header to store the PRJ information. So if you have a PRJ file for your data set, it's a nice way to embed that information along with the SegWi file. Same thing with the XDF file. It's written as a series of notes records in the XDF file. So again, that projection information gets permanently embedded with your XDF file if you have a PRJ included in your source folder. If you don't have it, it's no big deal. You just don't get those sort of extra benefits. Okay, so here's where it started reading the first SDF file. It told you when the sonar data started, so it looks like it overlaps the navigation time. It created the output, and it starts writing pings. And it continued on, went to the next file. There's 2 files in this directory. Okay, so let's go then and let's go back now and get to SonarWiz for a second, and let's just see, okay, if this thing worked, I should be able to now import those files into my SonarWiz project. So instead of using the original files, which we know are missing the fish position, I'm going to go to the out folder, and here are the 2 files that I just generated. And you notice that they have a -u suffix, and that's because I said to replace the fish position in here. So that's kind of your cue that there's something different about these files. These files have had the fish position replaced. If I replace the ship position, they would have a -p on the end, and of course if I can replace both, it would have a -pu on the end. So again, this is sort of an indication about what's been replaced. So I'm just going to quickly select these 2 files. They're really small, and I'm going to import them. And you can see now that using the fish position, the files come in and they plot in your mosaic. And then just to confirm that the navigation was indeed updated, I'm going to go back to our little SDF utility in SonarWiz, and this time I'm going to dump out, I'll just dump out one of these U files that we just replaced, so we can look at that in Excel. And indeed, here's our ship latitude and longitude that was there before, and now we've got fish latitude and longitude injected into the file. Okay, so this is again just to kind of describe why we do that. If you're given a file that does not have any navigation, or maybe it's got ship but not fish like we did in this case, or vice versa, you can inject that navigation into the file, and that's sort of the primary reason for using Nav Injector. Okay, let's see. So what I want to do next is to kind of move on to a second case, and that is when you want to inject something other than navigation into your file. So in this example, and these are, I brought these cases up because these are things that Steve has mentioned that customers have wanted to do and have kind of struggled with a little bit. So in this case, we're going to work with some EdgeTech 4125 data, and I'm going to use SonarWiz kind of to help me out here. Again, I'm going to open a different project in SonarWiz. So this is a blank, empty project, and I can show you that I can import the EdgeTech data that I want. I find it. So here's a small JSF file, and I can import that into this project. Okay, so there's my JSF file imported into SonarWiz, and I'm going to open it up in the bottom tracking window, and I just want to look at a couple of parameters here. What I notice right away is that there is no event number information here. So as I scroll through the file, the event number never changes, and also I want to apply layback to this file, but the one key thing I'm missing for layback is there's no cable out information either. So what I want to do is I want to use Nav Injector to not to replace the navigation data, but to actually insert cable out information and event numbers. So this would assume then that you've got some other source of that data. So you've got some other way to inject that data, some other source for that cable out and event number. Okay, so I'm going to go back here to my tools panel for a second, and I'm going to use the JSF utilities here. Again, since I'm working in JSF, I need a different sort of utility to dump out these files. So I'm going to go back to my sonar data folder, EdgeTech, and I think it's called New 4125. Okay, so there's my sample file, my JSF file I just imported, and I'm going to do the same thing as we did with the SDF. I'm just going to use my little dump utility to actually examine the parameters in file. So here's the folder or the file I just created, and you can see that it's got latitude, longitude, but there is no event numbers here. So that's one problem, and there's no cable out. And so what I want to do is I want to inject that data from some other source. Okay. Now, in this case, I've sort of created a source. I use that little utility with that Excel spreadsheet to pull out a few records, and then I just keyed in some time. But SonarWiz allows you to record kind of raw navigation, cable out, and that sort of thing. So you could have these sources from some other place. Maybe you're using HiPack for your nav, and so you might have a separate ASCII file for your navigation. In this case, I made up the navigation data, and I think I've got it here in my folder. Yeah, I just made up a text file. So just using Notepad, what I did was I created a simple little file with date, time, cable out, and event number. Okay, because these are the values that I want to inject into my JSF file. All right, so what I'm going to do then is go back and use NavInjectorPro, and this time I'm going to use a different template. So let's go take a look at that template. This one I created yesterday when I was preparing for this demonstration. But let's just say let's just go through and kind of talk about how you create this thing in the first place, because it's one of the trickier parts of using the utility. So I could just add a brand new one if I wanted to and start from scratch. So let's do that, and I'll just call it. I'll give it a name. I'll call it John's Test, and maybe call it Edge Tech, so we know which one we're using it with. And so that's just to identify it, and then we're going to say this is a template for inserting cable and event. All right, so now we've kind of described it, and then what we want to do is let's go back to Notepad here for a second so we can see what this file actually looks like. All right, so here's my source file, and I can see that my source file contains a date, a time, a cable out, and event number. So I'm going to say, okay, I need a date, so let me add a date. And I notice from the file here that this is month, day, year, and so I'm going to make sure that when I select the date, I've got to match the format of the date to the format that's in my file. So this looks like month, day, year, and I always do this wrong, so I'll probably do it wrong again today. We need another field here for time, and same thing for time. There's several different formats for time, so this looks like hour, minute, second, tenth. So I'll go here and choose HHMMSS and little ss. And now the next thing is cable. Say add cable out in meters. And if your cable out was not stored in meters, maybe in your file you've got it in feet or you've got it in decimeters or some other unit, you can scale it here. So if you needed to, you could multiply it by 10 or divide by 10, or maybe your cable counter wasn't zeroed when you put the towfish in the water, so you can also offset it. So this is an additive entry, and this is a multiplicative entry. All right. Okay, in this case, I'm just using meters for this demonstration, so I'm not going to need to do any further adjustment. And then the last field I need to enter in is the event number. So I've got some event numbers here, and again, those can be scaled and offset as well. Alrighty, so I've got my 4 fields that I need to enter, and what I want to do now to make sure that I've got it right is I want to test this against my text file. So I'm going to go in here and choose a text file, and that's in my SonarWiz project. Okay, so when I selected the file, what it uses, what this tool does is it tries to parse that file against these 4 template fields. And it did pretty well, except I see there's a problem here. There's a 0 record here at the first entry. I wonder why that is, and then I look, oh, there's actually a header record on this file. So I need to tell the utility that I've got a header record. So I want it to start one down from that header record. And so if I test that again, I might have to save it first. Let's try that again. If I test it again by choosing the file, oops, choose my template and choose my file. That now looks like it's parsed it out correctly. So I've got my cable out values and my event numbers in here. So I'm going to save that. So John's test edge deck is the new template that I just made. And so that's the template I want to use here. So now I need to go through and set up this dialog again to process this edge deck JSF file. And so I'll browse to the input navigation file, and that's this one that we've been playing around with, the text file. And this time I'm not going to process SDF files, but I'm going to process JSF files. So it's asking me where are the original JSF files, and those are in my sonar data folder. Actually, I think I can type this faster than I can select it. Edge Tech, and it is in new 4125, I think. And it's very important that you have the trailing slash on the end of these folders, because it'll try to create the file name with the folder name if you don't. And I want the files, the new JSF files, to be written out into the out folder. Okay, so I think I'm all set to go here. I've got my template selected. I've got my navigation data selected, and my source folder and my output folder. So I'll press the start button, and it doesn't really matter about what position we're going to update here because we're not going to update any position. So some of these settings now are kind of superfluous. Pretty early here in California, and so most of these entries here don't really pertain. So, but we do want to inject the cable out and the event number. So I'm going to press OK, and let's see what we got here. So we've got a red warning here. It says the template does not contain any position fields. Yeah, okay, that's fair enough. We knew that. We weren't trying to replace the navigation. We were only trying to inject some additional data. There was no PRJ file, but that's another issue we've already talked about. We knew we didn't have a PRJ file. And it scanned this folder here, and it found one JSF file, the sample file that we're using, and it created a new one with a -U extension in the output folder, and it updated 5,000 records in that JSF file. So let's just actually go in there and then see what it did. So what I want to do now is I want to re-import that file. So I'll go back to SonarWiz and import side scan files. Let me delete this guy first so I don't get confused. So what I want to do this time is not import the original one, but I want to take the one that we just made in the out folder, and I want to import that. Okay. And we want to make sure that now we have event numbers and cable out stored in this file. So I'll go test that the same way. I'll bring it up in the bottom tracker. And as I move the cursor around, if I look now here in this event column and the cable out column, as I move the cursor through the file, you can see that these numbers are changing. So now I've got, in the original acoustic file, now I've got real event numbers and real cable out. So I could then subsequently do some reporting or annotating if I wanted to, say, bottom track this file and annotate the slant range corrected with record with event numbers. I can do that as shown here. Okay, so again, this case then is just to inject data other than navigation. So cable out, let's just go look at Nav Injector and get an idea of what sorts of fields can be added. So we added cable out, but any of these other parameters, and these are documented in our little help file. So heave, pitch roll, geoid height, GDOP, HDOP, KP, line name, and so on. So not every target file has storage slots for these variables, but XDF has most of them. SegWi has probably the fewest, and then the other file types are sort of somewhere in between. CSF contains also most of these slots for storing these sorts of variables. Okay, so that's the second case, and then the third case, which is most of the time used for AUV operators. It's the case where you've started a SonarWiz project and you've imported data, and somewhere along that process, someone else comes along with a whole new navigation data set that says, hey, use this. This is the best kind of final post-process navigation data for this whole project. But you've already done lots of processing. You've done target picking. You've done bottom tracking. And you don't want to inject into the raw acoustic files. You want to inject into your SonarWiz project because you don't want to lose all the work that you've done. So I'm just going to show another SonarWiz project here for doing that. So I'm going to open up, this is not an AUV project, it's actually a Toad Klein 3900 project that Mike Brissett and I collected some data one day. So I'm going to take, and the first thing I'm going to do is just import a couple of files into this project. So I'll go to my import button here. And I've got a couple of files that have some nice overlapping targets. So that's lines 9 and 10. And so I'm going to import those two files here. Okay, so the scenario in this case is I'm working on a, you have to pretend it's a large project, and I want to go and I want to do all the processing I can. So the first thing I'm going to do is, because I think I'm in the mindset that this is the final data set, and I'm working hard towards completing it. So I might come in here and bottom track these files. Let's use our automatic tracker here to kind of do that. So that looks pretty good. I'll save that one and bring up the next one, and I'll track that one. The original bottom tracking was a little bit noisy, so I'm cleaning that up a little bit, and I'll save that. And let's see, then we might want to do a little, let's put some gain on here. Use the EGN function and apply that. Okay, that looks good. And let's put some gain on the other file. I'll use my make like selected button there to do that. Okay, so I've got my files processed, and oh, there's some targets, so I want to go and start picking some targets. It's an interesting kind of set of features right there. So what I want to do is I want to pick a target, and I see these I've got these three large rings and these kind of three smaller rings down here. So I'm just going to pick a target right on the center of this little object that's really none of those rings. It's just some sort of a feature there. And as I click that target, you can see there it is in the plan view. Okay, and so I've got to pick my target there, and then I'm also going to bring up this other file here, one right below it, and I want to pick a target on that same target on this image. Okay, so there are the same three targets, and I'm going to pick that same point here on this target, maybe edit it and zoom in a little bit on it. Okay, so there's my target on that file, and you can see I've got this other target here from the other line. So SonarWiz shows you the two different target locations. So the point of all this is I've been doing my processing, and I've picked targets, and I've done signal processing, and then in comes my colleague with a new navigation data set and said, hey, no, you should use this navigation. Well, I don't want, again, if I've got 100 files, I don't want to have to stop and re-import and re-bottom track and do all that stuff again. So what I really want to do is I want to fix up the navigation in my project. Okay, and before I do that, I'm just going to zoom here on this area of the mosaic and just do a quick measurement, because what I noticed is, hey, these two targets, they don't line up. If I measured the distance between them, they're about 15 meters apart. So there's obviously a problem in the navigation that maybe I didn't even catch yet. So my colleague's going to save me by bringing me new navigation that I'm going to inject into this project. And indeed, if I use like the swipe tool here or something, you can see if I pull these two, I want to make one transparent over the other, you can see that it doesn't really, these targets don't really line up. All right, so we're going to go back and we're going to use NavInjectorPro again. And this time what we're going to do is we're going to use a different template. We're going to use one called date, time, easting, and northing. Okay, and I'm going to go to the template manager so we can see that. And we are going to get my note here. Well, yeah, we're going to use an edited navigation set. So my colleague has brought me this new navigation file, and let's go take a look at that. So that's in SonarWiz project, Saanich Inlet. Again, this is just a text file that's got lines 8, 9, and 10, the navigation data all cleaned up for that data set. And when I test this data set against that template, I can see that it's parsed this into July 10th, 2008, and the date, and the easting, and the northing. Okay, and so this is the template that I want to use to fix up my data set. So I'm going to save that because that's the template I want to use. And I've got to choose my new navigation file because I'm not using the EdgeTech data anymore. I'm going to use this one that's I've already edited, and we can take a look at that here real quick. Actually, I think I do have it open already. So here's lines 8, 9, and 10, and you can see that I've got month, day, year, and hour, minute, second, tenth, and easting and northing in this file. The other thing is this file is tab separated. So one of the things that we want to do in here in our template, I don't know if I actually did that correctly or not, but let's go back and see. In my template, yes, I did. I specified the delimiter as being tab instead of a comma. So you can choose a space, a tab, or you can just type in whatever variable or character that you want to be your field delimiter. But in this case, we want to use the tab. Okay, so our source folder this time, since we're going to work with file types of CSF, which is the SonarWiz type of file, this is the only file type that gets overwritten. So we never overwrite a raw acoustic file like XTF or SegWi or JSF or SDF, but for a SonarWiz project, that's the whole idea. I want to update my project with this new navigation data. So I'm going to tell the utility where to write those CSF files, and actually I think I can type faster here. This project, and that was called Saanich Inlet, and I want to update the CSF files in the CSF folder. Okay, so again I've got my template selected, daytime, easting, northing. The navigation data is coming from that little text file we just looked at, and I wanted to update the CSF files in my project. So I'm going to press start. Same thing, you always get this confirmation dialog. This time we're going to update the fish position, and the interpolation settings will leave the same. Okay, this time it actually found a navigation gap because what happened is the navigation stopped at the end of one file and it started at the end of the next file, but that's okay. I'm not really too worried about that here. So it tells you it skipped records here where it didn't have navigation, so it skipped over some of them. It only wrote 1301 of 1378, so some of the records are going to have the old navigation in them. So again, you've got to have 100% overlap of your navigation to your raw sonar data if you want to update every ping. But let's just take a look here to see what happened in the SonarWiz project. So I just needed to tell SonarWiz to refresh, to redraw. So I'll zoom out here. And what I can do is zoom in here on this area. Now that's been redrawn. And I'm going to use that tool that I used before for swiping the top data set off the bottom data set. And you can now see that these features are way closer than they were. Still not perfect, but I was driving the boat, and I think one of us we're turning on one of these lines. But you can see that the imagery itself is much closer than it was. But the two target symbols still are still out of position, right? Because they don't know that the underlying navigation has changed. So in the contact manager, what we need to do is just to tell it to recompute all contacts. That's what this button's for, if you've ever wondered. So this recomputes the contact locations and moves them to the new corrected navigation. So now you can see that these contacts are much closer than they were before. So they're about 1 meter apart now. So this is sort of the level of accuracy of the data that we have. Okay, so I've kind of run over a little bit of time here, but I just wanted to close with kind of a summary of NavInjectorPro and some of the pitfalls. So the thing that customers have the most problem with is the actual template creation and getting the formats of the dates, specifically the date normally, to match the what's in the ASCII file. So it's real important when you enter a date to make sure you choose the format that matches the ASCII file that you have. And then the other thing is to make sure that the order of the fields matches the order that you enter them here must match the order, of course, that they occur in the file. So those are the two biggest kind of pitfalls. I don't know if you noticed, I used version 19, 5.01.019, which was I just posted yesterday. The one that was actually in SonarWiz and the distribution had a couple of bugs that I found when I was doing the demonstration prep yesterday, and so we've updated that. So if you want to get that latest version, probably. Anyway, if you've got questions, let's see here if we've got any questions. Looks like we might have a few. Okay, if you change the name of the line using NavInjectorPro, does that change the name of the line on import? No. If you change the name of the line, if you inject the line, that is used in specific places. So there is a line name slot in SegY that we pull out. And so this is more like the line that you steered versus the file name. So that's how that's used in and I believe it's used in SegY and also probably in XTF. So let's see. I'm not sure if there's any other questions here. Yep, one more here. Gosh, this is a small interface here. Okay, I guess that might be our only question. I'm not able to get any other questions. But if you have questions, just please email the support email address, and we'll get those out to you today. So thanks again. Sorry I ran over a little bit, but I hope you found this useful. If I didn't cover anything, again, there's a help button here on the utility that's we've been trying to keep up to date here. It's got most of the things I talked about. So thanks again for attending, and we'll talk to you soon.